Now, Ethiopia's economic growth rate remains at a relatively high level in spite of some slowdown. It is expected that GDP growth rate in the next 2 fiscal years will be 7% and 6.5% respectively. For more on this, I'm joined by Ailenesh Tafesi, country risk analyst at RMB. Now, I know you have an unfair advantage because you are Ethiopian by birth. So I'm going to, I'm going to tap into this advantage and hopefully get some really great on-the-ground insights. Let's first look at the sovereign rating. Why would the country consider doing this now?
So it's two basic reasons. First of all, the government has indicated that at some point or the other, they would like to issue a Eurobond. Another reason, of course, would be to attract FDI. From a Eurobond perspective, the government is sitting in a position now where they have foreign currency shortages. At the same time, they have very ambitious investment plans for infrastructure. To give you an idea of the infrastructure plans, the Grand Renaissance Dam that they're hoping to build on the Nile, which is a hydropower facility, is expected to cost them about 10% of their GDP. So it's a huge amount of money that they're going to need, and they're going to need to tap into some sort of debt market in order to get this.
But how deep could the potential debt markets be for a country like Ethiopia, which has traditionally been seen as a very closed economy, not very open to foreign direct investment? This about turn, is it significant enough to see a significant interest from the investment community?
So you're right. For a long time, Ethiopia has been seen as a closed economy. And that's because basically the model they do follow there is a state-led development model, which means we haven't seen a lot of private players in the industry. But the government does know, and they have acknowledged, that in order to sustain the high rate of growth that they've seen over the last 10 years, they're going to have to start allowing private investors to come in. And over the last 5 years, we've seen them gradually opening up the investment space to foreign investors in things like manufacturing, agriculture, real estate development. On the other hand, it being such a closed economy, it's going to be a gradual let go.
Right.
They have indicated that telecoms and the financial sector are a no-go area for foreign investors. This is primarily because these industries are state-owned, they're making a lot of money for the government, and they probably wouldn't want to threaten that with competition.
Let's look at these sectors a little bit more broadly. Which are the ones that are open for foreign direct investment, seem to be giving the greatest amount of yield and are probably the most attractive right now?
Right now, the government is very focused on the manufacturing sector. Over the last couple of years, we've seen Heineken opening up a brewery there. The fashion retailer H&M has indicated that they plan on opening factories there. And currently, there are talks with Walmart, although the degree to which exactly where they are in those talks is still being seen.
To a large extent, I think Ethiopia often comes in many reports as the poorest country on the African continent, and yet we are seeing growth rates of up to 10%. How is the government turning the tide in terms of translating that growth into socio-economic benefits?
To a certain degree, yes and no. Growth rates are very high, but unfortunately that's because we're coming off a very low base. What is really good is we're seeing a lot of investor interest, primarily because it's been such a closed state. A lot of the industries are underdeveloped, which gives a lot of opportunity for new guys coming into play in that market. At the same time, there are about 90 million people in Ethiopia, it's the second most populous nation on the continent.
Right.
Great customer base, hopefully, for clients.
Right.
So all of this combined is getting investor attention. So we're sitting at a place now where government really needs a policy shift to say, we're at this place now where we really do need to start opening up our economy and allowing foreign investors to come in.
But how shiny is the Ethiopian story? We talk about a 10% growth rate, and then we have the IMF coming out and say, no, actually we need to review this growth rate. It's actually 6.5, which is a significant drop. From the analysis that RMB does, where do you sit on that scale?
So that's definitely one of the problems that you would have with analyzing a country like Ethiopia. Most of the time, inflation figures, GDP growth figures that the government releases is very different to what the IMF will say. At this point, we're looking at about growth of around 7% is what the consensus is on.
Right.
So that's where we're sitting there.
Let's look at the agriculture sector. It's one of those sectors that has almost been seen as a shining star for Ethiopia, as one that's really going to catapult the country forward. Are we seeing any policies that are supporting the further growth of agriculture?
Yes, so traditionally it's been very much, when we say agriculture in Ethiopia, it's been very much sort of small plot holdings by small farmers in the rural areas. What the government has done these days is to get in investors predominantly from Asian countries, private Indian investors from the Middle East, to do more large-scale farming and exporting of food. This has come with a bit of criticism, the criticism of course being the government is giving this land to the Indian and Asian and Middle Eastern investors by kicking people off the land. So there's a dual problem.
I mean, again, I want to be the doomy cloud in the room, because again, you often see Ethiopia accused of a lack of transparency. We see so much illicit trade flows leaving the country, so much so that this accounts for even more what they, in terms of what they're able to attract into the country. Have you seen any clear, bold steps to try and improve transparency and governance in the country?
I actually think that their indications of we want to actually get a rating is a good indicator.
Right.
In order to get one of the three major agencies, Moody's, Fitch, to come in, an S&P to come in and rate you, you have to be very transparent. So I think by being transparent and getting a rating, they're actually sending a signal to the market to say, get comfortable with us, we're here, have a look at what we have to offer.
Again, another area of concern has been inflation. I mean, the Ethiopian government has been printing money since 2005. You know, where do we see this? Is there a silver lining, or are we going to see in the horizon this sort of turning around and getting the inflation numbers back in check?
There's structural constraints to this for the government, and on top of that, there's also the issue of, for us as investors looking into Ethiopia, it's can we trust these inflation numbers? We've seen inflation in 2011 as high as 30%. It's very up and down. Right now it's sitting at about 11%. And this is because the only mechanism that the central bank has in order to control inflation would be through, you know, their foreign reserves. So by trying to control inflation, they end up depleting their foreign reserves, and then they sit looking for money.
Very quickly, before I let you go, give us some insights in terms of political stability. Of course, this is still a very important indicator for investors before they plow funds into any country.
About a year ago, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who had been in power for about 20 years, passed away unexpectedly. At that point in time, there was a lot of investor fears that, you know, we could possibly see war breaking out, there's going to be destabilization. But they followed the constitutional process, the acting Prime Minister took over, and it's been relatively stable. That said, I think it's important to note that Ethiopia faces a lot of criticism in terms of their human rights abuses and those sort of track records. So we need to see some sort of improvement on that end. And also questions have come as to the election process. Was it really fair? It's a de facto one-party state at this point.